Get your things and leave. Make sure no one finds out about this.
All you care about is your name and wealth. Do you care about how I feel about this too?
Pretend this never happened.
I woke up in a bed that wasn't mine. The sheets were too soft, the kind of soft that only comes with money, real money, the kind I'd never have in my entire life. The room was too big, too quiet. And the smell, God, the smell was all wrong. Expensive cologne mixed with something clean and sharp, like the kind of detergent rich people use that poor folks like me can't even pronounce. It hung in the air like a warning. My head was pounding so hard I thought my skull might crack open. Every heartbeat sent a fresh wave of pain through my temples. My body felt heavy, disconnected, like I'd been dropped from a great height and landed wrong. I blinked hard once, twice, 3 times, trying to force my eyes to focus, trying to make sense of where I was and how I got here. The ceiling was high, too high, with crown molding that probably cost more than my entire year's salary. A chandelier hung in the center, crystal and gold, catching the early morning light and scattering it across the walls like diamonds. This wasn't just a bedroom. This was a statement. This was power. And then it hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just any room. This was his room. Kang Min-jae, the CEO, the man I worked for, the man whose house I cleaned, whose meals I helped prepare, whose entire existence I orbited like a distant moon, barely visible, easily forgotten. Panic shot through my veins like ice water. I sat up fast, too fast. The room tilted and spun and I had to grip the sheets just to stay upright. My vision blurred at the edges and for a second I thought I might pass out again. But I forced myself to breathe. In through my nose, out through my mouth. Slow, steady, even though nothing about this situation was steady. That's when I realized I was barely dressed. My uniform was gone. The plain black dress with the white collar that marked me as staff, as invisible as beneath notice. My shoes were gone. My hair tie was gone. Everything that made sense, everything that kept me safe in my little corner of this world, was just gone. I looked down at myself and my stomach dropped. I was wearing a silk nightshirt, his nightshirt. It was too big, hanging off one shoulder, the fabric smooth and expensive against my skin. I'd never worn anything like this in my life. I didn't belong in clothes like this. I didn't belong in this room. What happened last night? I pressed my palms hard against my eyes, trying to think, trying to pull something, anything, from the thick fog that had settled over my memory. But there was nothing solid, just fragments, pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit together. I remembered being in the kitchen, late, later than usual. The other staff had already gone to bed. I was finishing up, wiping down the counters, putting away the last of the dishes. Then Mrs. Kang appeared. She never came to the kitchen. She had people for that. But there she was, standing in the doorway in her silk robe, her face calm and composed like always. She'd asked me to do something. What was it? My brain felt like cotton, thick and useless. Medicine. She'd asked me to take medicine to her son. To Min-jae. He was working late again, she said. He had a headache. He needed something to help him sleep. And could I please take it to him because everyone else had already retired for the night and I was the only one available. I remember thinking it was strange. Why me? Why not call one of the senior staff? But you don't question Mrs. Kang, not if you want to keep your job. So I'd taken the small silver tray with the glass of water and the pills, and I'd walked through the quiet house, my footsteps echoing on the floors, my heart beating a little faster than it should have been. I'd knocked on his door. Twice. Soft, respectful. And he'd opened it. I remembered his face, the exhaustion carved into every line. The way his shirt was unbuttoned at the top, his tie discarded somewhere, his hair messy like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked at me like he was seeing through me, like I was a ghost. He'd taken the tray, said something in Korean I didn't understand, and then... nothing. Just black, just empty space where memory should be. I threw the covers off and stumbled to my feet. My legs were shaking so bad I thought they might give out. I grabbed the edge of the nightstand to steady myself, and that's when I saw it. My uniform, crumpled on a chair in the corner like it had been tossed there in a hurry. My shoes were under the chair, one on its side, the other upright. I grabbed my clothes and pulled them on as fast as my trembling hands would allow. The buttons were hard to manage. My fingers kept slipping. I felt like I was going to throw up. I had to get out. I had to leave before anyone saw me, before he saw me, before this became real in a way I couldn't take back. But when I turned toward the door, my heart stopped. Because he was already awake. Kang Min-jae stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to me, hands in his pockets, staring out at the Seoul skyline like he was trying to find answers in the buildings and the traffic below. The morning light cut across his shoulders, sharp and unforgiving. He was dressed in a fresh white shirt, half-buttoned, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His hair was still damp like he'd just showered. He looked like something out of a magazine, untouchable, perfect, expensive. And I was just the help who'd somehow ended up in his bed. He didn't turn around, but he spoke. His voice was flat, cold, empty of anything that might have been human. You should leave before anyone sees you. The words hit me like a slap. I tried to swallow, but my throat was too dry. I don't know what happened, I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted, weaker. Neither do I. That stopped me cold. I stared at his back, at the rigid line of his spine, at the way his shoulders were pulled tight with tension. He didn't remember either. Somehow, that made everything 1,000 times worse. Because if he didn't remember, then we were both victims of something. But I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would be the one blamed. Then how did I started? I don't know. He cut me off, sharper this time, like the words were glass in his mouth. But you need to go, now, before the staff starts their rounds, before my mother wakes up, before this becomes a problem I have to deal with. A problem, that's what I was, that's all I was. I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream that this wasn't my fault, that I didn't ask for this, that I was just as confused and terrified as he was. But I didn't. Because people like me don't get to argue with people like him. We don't get to have feelings, opinions, or rights. We just do what we're told and we survive. So I grabbed my shoes and I ran. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the door handle. I slipped out into the hallway and closed the door as quietly as I could behind me. The hallway was empty, silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like it's pressing down on your chest. I'd made maybe 20 steps when I heard footsteps behind me. Fast, deliberate, someone who knew exactly where they were going. I turned. Mrs. Young, the head housekeeper, the woman who ran this house like a military base and had hated me from the moment I arrived 6 months ago. She'd made that clear in 1,000 small ways. The way she assigned me the worst jobs, the way she criticized everything I did, the way she looked at me like I was dirt she'd stepped in. She stopped when she saw me. Her eyes traveled slowly from my face to my wrinkled uniform to my shoes clutched in my hand to my hair that I hadn't had time to fix. Her lips pressed into a thin, hard line. Her eyes narrowed. Walk of shame, is it? The words felt like a punch to the gut. I opened my mouth to explain, to defend myself, to say something, anything. But nothing came out. Because what could I possibly say that would make this better? She stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell her perfume, floral and suffocating. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but it was the kind of whisper that cut. You think you're smart? You think you can trap him and get his money? Girls like you are all the same. Pretty face, sad story, and a plan to climb your way out of poverty on someone else's back. But you picked the wrong family, sweetheart. The Kangs eat girls like you for breakfast. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. I wanted to tell her I didn't plan anything, that I didn't want this, that I was a victim here too. But the words stuck in my throat. She leaned even closer. You're done here. Pack your things. I'll make sure you're gone by tonight. Then she walked past me, her heels clicking against the floor like a death march. I stood there, frozen, my entire body shaking. I couldn't cry. I couldn't move. I just stood there in that empty hallway, feeling like the walls were closing in. By the time I made it back to the staff quarters, everyone knew. I could see it in their faces the moment I walked in. The way conversations stopped mid-sentence. The way eyes followed me across the room. The way people who'd been friendly yesterday suddenly couldn't look at me today. I kept my head down and walked to my room at the back of the quarters. It was small, barely bigger than a closet. A single bed, a tiny desk, a window that looked out at the garden wall. But it was mine, the only space in this entire house that was mine. I closed the door and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. That's when I heard them. The voices on the other side of the wall, not even trying to be quiet. I heard she snuck into his room, probably planned the whole thing. That was Hannah, one of the younger maids. She'd always been nice to me before. We'd even had coffee together once. Of course she did. Why else would she be here? You think she actually cares about taking care of old Mrs. Park? Another voice. Jaewon, the cook's assistant. She's been here, 6 months? And now she's probably pregnant with his baby. Watch. She'll be demanding money next week. Gold digger. Trash. Shameless. The words piled on top of each other, crushing me under their weight. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor, my knees pulled up to my chest, my hands covering my ears. But I could still hear them. I could still hear every word. Nobody knocked on my door that day. Nobody checked on me. I was invisible again, but in a different way now. Now I was invisible because I was beneath contempt. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just sat on my bed and stared at the wall and tried to figure out how my life had fallen apart so completely in the span of one night. That night, alone in my tiny room with the door locked and the lights off, I finally let myself cry. Big, ugly, choking sobs that I had to muffle with my pillow so nobody would hear. Because even now, even in my lowest moment, I couldn't let them see me break. The days after that were a nightmare. I went to work. I did my job. I cleaned the floors and folded the laundry and served the meals and pretended I couldn't hear the whispers that followed me everywhere I went. The other staff barely spoke to me. When they did, it was orders, short and cold. Mrs. Young watched me like a hawk, waiting for me to make a mistake so she could fire me. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. I did everything perfectly. I showed up early. I stayed late. I kept my head down and my mouth shut. Min-jae avoided me, or maybe I avoided him. Either way, we existed in the same house but in completely different universes. When I saw him in the hallways, I pressed myself against the wall and looked at the floor until he passed. He never acknowledged me, never looked at me. It was like that night never happened. But his mother watched me. Mrs. Kang, the woman who'd sent me to his room in the first place. She watched me with this strange expression on her face. Not anger, not disgust, something else, something calculating, like she was waiting for something, like she knew something I didn't. It made my skin crawl. 2 weeks passed like that. 2 weeks of whispers and cold shoulders, and feeling like I was walking on a knife's edge every second of every day. And then I started feeling sick. At first, I thought it was stress. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating much. My body was just shutting down under the pressure. That made sense. That was logical. But then the nausea got worse. I couldn't keep anything down. The smell of food made me want to throw up. I was exhausted all the time, even though I was barely doing anything. And then I missed my period. The fear that settled into my bones when I realized was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. It was cold, heavy, and absolute. No. I bought a pregnancy test from a convenience store 3 blocks away from the house. I paid in cash. I hid it in my bag like it was something illegal and dangerous. I couldn't let anyone see, couldn't let anyone know. I took the test at 4 in the morning in the staff bathroom, when I knew everyone else would be asleep. I sat on the cold tile floor and watched the little window on the test and prayed to every god I could think of that it would be negative. 2 lines appeared. Positive. I stared at it until my vision blurred, until I couldn't breathe, until the reality of it crashed down on me so hard I thought I might die right there on that bathroom floor. I was pregnant with his baby, with Kang Min-jae's baby. And my life was over. I sat there for over an hour, just staring at that test, trying to process what this meant, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do, but every path forward looked like a dead end. If I kept the baby, I'd be labeled a gold digger forever. They'd say I trapped him. They'd say I planned it. Nobody would believe the truth. If I got rid of it, I'd be alone with that choice for the rest of my life. And part of me, a part I didn't want to acknowledge, didn't want to do that. Either way, I was trapped. I knew I had to tell him. I didn't want to. God, I didn't want to. The thought of facing him, of seeing that cold expression on his face, of hearing him accuse me of lying again, made me want to disappear entirely. But I had to, because this wasn't just about me anymore. There was a life growing inside me, and whether I wanted it or not, he had a right to know. So I waited. I watched his schedule. I learned his patterns. And I found a moment when he was alone in his office late at night, long after the rest of the house had gone to sleep. I stood outside his door for 10 minutes, trying to build up the courage to knock. My hand was shaking. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. Finally, I knocked, twice, soft but firm. "Come in." His voice sent a chill down my spine, but I pushed the door open anyway. The office was huge, dark wood paneling, bookshelves that stretched to the ceiling, a massive desk covered in papers and files, and a laptop that glowed in the dim light. He sat behind the desk, still in his work clothes, his face lit by the screen, looking exactly like what he was, a man with the weight of an empire on his shoulders. He glanced up, saw me, and his entire expression hardened. "What do you want?" No greeting. No acknowledgement that we were human beings who'd shared something, even if neither of us could remember it. Just cold, flat dismissal. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together to hide it. "I need to talk to you." "Then talk." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, waiting. Not patient. Just waiting for me to say whatever I needed to say so I could leave and he could get back to work. I opened my mouth. The words were right there, sitting on my tongue, heavy and terrifying. "I'm pregnant. It's yours. We need to figure out what to do." But before I could say any of it, the door opened behind me. And she walked in. Han Seo-yeon, his fiancée, the woman he was supposed to marry, the woman whose family was just as powerful and wealthy as his, the woman who belonged in his world in a way I never could. She was beautiful in that effortless way rich women always are. Long black hair that fell in perfect waves, skin that looked like porcelain, designer clothes that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years. She moved through the room like she owned it, like she owned him. She looked at me and for just a second something cold flashed in her eyes, but then she smiled. Sweet, polite, empty. "Oh," she said, her voice like honey. "I didn't realize we had guests." Min-jae stood up from his desk. "Seo-yeon, this isn't a good time." Clearly, she glided past me like I was a piece of furniture, like I didn't even register as a person. Then she turned to him, her hand resting possessively on his desk. "We need to finalize the wedding details. Your mother has been calling all day." "I'll handle it tomorrow." "She wants an answer tonight." Her voice was still sweet, but there was steel underneath. A reminder that she wasn't asking, she was telling. There was silence, heavy, suffocating. I could feel the tension in the room like a living thing. And I realized, standing there between them, that I didn't belong in this conversation. I didn't belong in this room. I didn't belong in this world. I took a step back toward the door. "I'll come back." "No need," Seo-yeon said, still smiling that empty smile. "I'm sure whatever you need to say can wait, can't it?" She wasn't really asking. She was dismissing me, putting me in my place. I looked at Min-jae, waiting for him to say something, anything, to tell her I was here first, to give me even a small acknowledgement that I mattered. But he didn't. He just stood there, his jaw tight, his eyes unreadable. So I left. I walked out of that office and closed the door behind me and made it maybe 10 steps down the hallway before I heard footsteps behind me. Fast, purposeful, angry. "Wait." I turned. Seo-yeon stood there, her smile completely gone now. In its place was something cold, calculating, and dangerous. "Let's be very clear about something," she said, her voice low and sharp. "I don't know what you think happened between you and Min-jae, and honestly, I don't care. Maybe you threw yourself at him, maybe he had a weak moment. It doesn't matter." "I didn't." "I don't care," she cut me off. "What I care about is making sure you understand your place. Your staff. You're nothing. You're replaceable. And if you think for even 1 second that you can use whatever happened to worm your way into his life, into his family, into his money, you are very, very wrong." I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was closing up. She stepped closer, so close I could smell her expensive perfume, could see the coldness in her perfect eyes. "Disappear," she whispered. "Leave this house. Leave Seoul. Leave Korea. I don't care where you go or what you do. But if you stay, if you try to make this into something it's not, I will make your life a living hell. Do you understand me?" I still couldn't speak. I just stood there, frozen, while she stared at me like I was an insect she was deciding whether or not to crush. Finally, she smiled again. That same cold, empty smile. "Good, I'm glad we understand each other." Then she turned and walked back toward Min-jae's office, her heels clicking against the floor like gunshots. I stood there in the empty hallway, shaking, my heart racing, my mind spinning. She just threatened me, openly, calmly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that she meant every word. I went back to my room and locked the door. I checked the lock 3 times to make sure it was secure. Then I pushed my desk in front of the door for extra measure. I knew it was paranoid. I knew it was probably unnecessary. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in danger. That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. Every creak of the old house settling made my heart race. I lay in bed with my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence and wondering what I was going to do. I couldn't tell Min-jae now, not with her watching, not with her ready to destroy me the second I tried. But I couldn't keep the secret forever either. Eventually, people would notice. Eventually, the truth would come out. And when it did, I'd be completely alone. Around 3 in the morning, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Footsteps outside my door, slow, deliberate, like someone was standing there listening, waiting. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering in my chest, my eyes locked on the door. The handle turned, just a little, testing, checking. I grabbed the lamp off my nightstand, my hands shaking, ready to use it as a weapon if I had to. But the door didn't open. The lock held. After a moment, the handle turned back to its original position. The footsteps moved away, fading down the hallway. I sat there in the dark for the rest of the night, the lamp still clutched in my hands, too terrified to move, too terrified to sleep. Someone wanted me gone. Someone was willing to do more than just threaten. And I had no idea how to protect myself. The next morning, everything fell apart. I came back from breakfast, exhausted and jumpy from not sleeping, to find my room destroyed. The door was hanging open. Everything inside had been torn apart. My clothes were scattered everywhere, some of them ripped. My bed had been flipped. My few belongings, the small things I'd brought from home, were broken or missing entirely. The little jewelry box my mother gave me before she died was smashed on the floor, the cheap necklace inside snapped in half. And there, in the center of my pillow, was a note. Simple, direct, terrifying. Leave or die. I stood in the doorway, staring at it, my brain trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just a threat anymore. This was a promise. Someone had been in my room. Someone had touched my things. Someone had left me a message that couldn't be clearer. I picked up the note with shaking hands. The paper was expensive, thick, the kind rich people used. The handwriting was neat, controlled, like whoever wrote it had done so calmly, deliberately, without any emotion at all. That somehow made it worse. I looked around my destroyed room and something inside me snapped. Not broke, snapped, like a wire pulled too tight. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't do this anymore. I had to leave. Tonight, right now if possible. I started packing what I could salvage. A few changes of clothes, My passport. The small amount of money I'd managed to save over the past 6 months. It wasn't much. Maybe enough for a bus ticket. Maybe enough for a few nights in a cheap motel while I figured out what to do next. I'd go back to the States. I'd figure something out. Anything was better than staying here and waiting to die. I was shoving clothes into my bag when I heard the door open behind me. I spun around, my heart in my throat, expecting to see Mrs. Young or one of the other staff or maybe even whoever had destroyed my room coming back to finish the job. But it was worse than that. Mrs. Kang stood in the doorway, perfectly composed as always, her hands clasped in front of her, her expression calm and unreadable. Going somewhere. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My voice was gone. She walked into my room, stepping carefully over the mess, and closed the door behind her. Then she sat on the edge of my overturned bed like we were old friends having a casual chat. "I'll make this simple," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I know you're pregnant." My blood turned to ice. "I know it's my son's child, and I know you think you have some kind of leverage now, some way to force yourself into this family. I don't want anything from you," I managed to say. "Good, because I'm going to give you a choice." She reached into her designer purse and pulled out an envelope. It was thick, fat with cash, more money than I'd ever seen in my life. She held it out to me. "Take this, go back to America, get an abortion, and we'll never speak of this again. You'll have enough money to start over, to build a new life, to pretend none of this ever happened." I stared at the envelope, at the money, at the easy way out she was offering me. "And if I don't?" Her smile was thin, sharp, like a knife. "Then you'll regret it, I can promise you that." The words hung in the air between us, not quite a threat, but close enough. I looked at her, really looked at her, and suddenly everything clicked into place. The way she'd appeared in the kitchen that night, the way she'd specifically asked me to bring medicine to Min-jae, the way she'd been watching me ever since. "Did you do this?" The words came out before I could stop them. "Did you plan that night? Did you drug him?" For a moment, just a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw something underneath, something cold and calculating and completely devoid of empathy. Then she smiled, and that told me everything I needed to know. "You're insane," I whispered. "I'm practical." She stood up, smoothing her skirt, completely unbothered by my accusation. "My son needs an heir. His fiancée can't give him one. Medical issue. Very unfortunate. But you're young and healthy and fertile, so I made it happen. Simple as that. He'll find out when I tell him." "Will you?" She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the handle. "Who do you think he'll believe? His mother, who has loved him and cared for him his entire life? Or the help, a foreigner with no connections, no family, no one who will even notice when you disappear?" The words hit me like a physical blow. "Take the money, Cecilia. It's the smart choice. The only choice, really." Then she left, closing the door softly behind her, like we'd just finished discussing the weather. I stood there in my destroyed room, the envelope still on the bed where she'd left it, and felt the walls closing in. She was right about one thing. Nobody would believe me. Nobody would help me. I was completely alone in this. I picked up the envelope, felt the weight of it in my hands. It would be so easy to take it, to run, to start over somewhere far away from here. But even as I thought it, I knew I couldn't do it. Not the abortion part. I couldn't explain why. Maybe it was because this baby was the only real thing I had left. Maybe it was because getting rid of it felt like letting them win. Maybe I was just stupid. But I couldn't do it. I shoved the envelope in my bag, not as acceptance but as evidence. Then I finished packing. I'd leave tonight, but I wouldn't do what she wanted. I'd figure something else out. I had to. But I never made it out of the house. That evening, as I was getting ready to slip out through the back entrance, something went wrong. I started feeling dizzy, then nauseous. Then there was pain. Sharp and sudden and terrifying, low in my abdomen, radiating out until I couldn't stand up straight. I tried to walk. I tried to get to the bathroom, but my legs wouldn't work right. Then I saw the blood. Just a little at first, then more, dark and terrifying against the light fabric of my clothes. I tried to call out. I tried to scream for help, but my voice came out weak and broken. I made it to the hallway before my legs gave out completely. I collapsed against the wall, sliding down to the floor, my vision going dark at the edges. The last thing I remember is someone screaming, high-pitched and panicked, and then footsteps running toward me, and then nothing. Just darkness. When I woke up, everything was white. White walls, white ceiling, white sheets, the harsh smell of disinfectant and the distant beeping of machines. Hospital. I was in a hospital. I tried to sit up, but my body felt like it was made of lead. Everything hurts. My head, my stomach, my heart. A nurse appeared at my side, young and tired-looking, her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. "You're awake. Good, don't try to move too much. You had a scare." A scare, what a delicate way to put it. "The baby," I managed to whisper. My throat was so dry it hurt to talk. "The baby's fine," she said, checking something on the monitor beside my bed. "You were bleeding, but we managed to stop it. You're going to need bed rest, and you need to avoid stress." Avoid stress, right, because that was possible. "How long have I been here?" "About 6 hours. It's evening now. The doctor will come check on you soon." She left before I could ask anything else. I lay there, staring at the white ceiling, my hand unconsciously moving to my stomach. The baby was fine. That should have been a relief. But all I could think about was what came next. Because if I was in a hospital, that meant people knew. Records existed. There was no hiding it now. And then I heard voices outside my room, getting closer, getting louder. I turned my head toward the door just as it opened. Kang Min-jae walked in, his face hard and cold as stone. Behind him, his mother. And behind her, Han Seo-yeon, her expression carefully neutral but her eyes sharp and calculating. They all stared at me, like I was something they'd found on the bottom of their shoes. Min-jae stepped forward, his hands in his pockets, his entire posture radiating controlled anger. "Is it true?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, my mouth was too dry. My brain was too slow. "Is it mine?" His voice was harder now, demanding. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw it all there in his face. The anger, the fear, the accusation. He'd already decided I was guilty. He'd already decided this was my fault. "Yes," I whispered. The single word seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Then Seo-yeon laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound that made my skin crawl. "Of course it is. She probably planned this from the very beginning. Probably poked holes in the condoms or switched out the pills or some other pathetic scheme." "I didn't," I said, louder this time. "I didn't plan any of this." "Shut up." Min-jae's voice cut through the room like a blade. He leaned down, his face inches from mine, his eyes burning with rage. "You think I'm going to believe you? You think I'm stupid enough to fall for this? You're a liar, a manipulator, and I want you out of my house, out of my life. Do you understand me?" "Your mother drugged you." The words came out before I could stop them. Desperate, pleading, true. She planned the whole thing, she admitted it to me, she wanted this to happen. Mrs. Kang didn't even blink. Her face remained perfectly composed. "She's lying, Min-jae. She's desperate and she's lying." "I'm not lying." "Yes, you are." He straightened up, his expression disgusted. "And I'm done listening to you. You're fired, effective immediately. And if you try to come after me or my family for money, I'll bury you so deep you'll never see daylight again. Are we clear?" Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of them. "Get out," he said again, quieter this time but somehow more final. Mrs. Kang placed a gentle hand on her son's arm. "Let's go. She's not worth any more of your time." They turned to leave, all three of them, like I was already forgotten. But at the door, Seo-yeon paused. She looked back at me, and for just a second her mask dropped, and I saw pure hatred in her eyes. Then she smiled, sweet, empty, terrifying. And they were gone. I lay there in that hospital bed, alone, broken, with a baby growing inside me and absolutely no idea what I was going to do next. The nurse came back a few minutes later with discharge papers. I was being released. No explanation, no discussion, just released. I signed the papers with shaking hands and got dressed in the clothes someone had brought from the house. They smelled clean, but felt wrong on my skin. I walked out of that hospital at 9 o'clock at night with nowhere to go. No job, no home, no money except what was in my bag, pregnant and alone in a country that didn't want me. The city lights stretched out in front of me, beautiful and indifferent. People rushed past on the sidewalks, going to dinner, going home, living their lives while mine fell apart. I started walking. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stop. Because if I stopped, if I let myself really think about what had just happened, I'd fall apart completely. And I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not yet. Not when I still had to survive. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button right now because what happens next will completely change everything. Cecilia's nightmare is just beginning. The people who tried to destroy her have no idea who they're really dealing with. And the truth, when it finally comes out, will shatter everything they thought they knew. Don't miss episode 2 where secrets are revealed, alliances shift, and Cecilia discovers she's not as powerless as everyone thinks. Because the girl they tried to erase isn't just going to survive. She's going to fight back. What happens when Cecilia has nowhere left to run? Will she survive on the SDRETS of Seoul? And who is the mysterious person who's been watching her this whole time? Find out in episode 2. The truth is darker than you can imagine.